So you grew up, you were born in Iraq and grew up in Iraq.
Yes.
I guess what could now be referred to as the good old days under Saddam Hussein. Do you think of them as the good old days? Because
no,
not that great now.
I mean, it's really, I mean, not sorry to use the word. It's like it's a clusterfuck.
It's the internet. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, living under Saddam Hussein was not really great. I mean, plus I was living under the sanctions when Saddam Hussein was the president. So
it was two things. Those are two separate things.
Yeah.
So you had the regime itself.
You had the regime and you had the sanctions.
Sanctions applied by the U.S. and UK and everybody.
Yeah, and I mean it's literally a prison living under Saddam Hussein.
So what was it like on any given day? You're 13 years old. What was it like?
Well, I mean, you see his pictures everywhere, and you have to, like, when you go to classroom in elementary school, you have to stand up and say, "Long live Saddam Hussein." When 9/11 happened, he declared a holiday in the schools, in which my school was like praising the Mujahideen who did 9/11, because he started like the faith campaign after the Gulf War. That's where there's a lot of confusion in which they consider Saddam Hussein to be a secularist. I mean, he's secularist compared to ISIS, but that really doesn't say much. Like, probably Al-Qaeda is secular compared to ISIS.
Right.
So,
but was he just using religion, or did you think he actually believed?
I mean, I'm not really good in psychoanalysis, but I think that regardless of whether he was using it for his own benefit, is like Iraq is a religious society. So using religion is definitely a beneficial tool. If the people, he cannot use religion in Sweden, for example, but he was definitely able to use it. And plus, he built a lot of mosques, and he was. Also, I mean, since the Gulf War, I mean, he started waging jihad against the West, and he started bringing people like Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who became the leader of Al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia. He came to Iraq before the war, and so yeah, I mean.
So for your life, though, so you're 13 years old. You're
and the war happened.
Yeah, I mean, when were you having your secular awakening in yourself?
Well, I mean, the lucky part of me is that I was raised in a sort of liberal family. I call them cafeteria Muslims. So my dad said oh, you can think for yourself, and I was reading the Bible, the Old Testament, the Torah, the Talmud, and all of this stuff, and all of them.
Get a copy of the Talmud in.
The internet is okay. Even though it was like the intranet, but there were some parts that you can actually get online, and I've seen that all of these religions make objective claims of them being true. Right. So I said, okay, well, either one of them is true or all of them are false. And I moved, start reading more about science, and I just realized that's probably all of them are false. And but I would say my spark to activism came in after the war. I mean, when the first elections happened in Iraq in 2005, and I was afraid of that the Shia, when they're going to take off the power, the Islamist Shia, they're going to take off the power, they're going to start discriminating against the Sunnis, and that would lead to a civil war, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, it's very sad to be right on this subject.
So you actually saw that coming? You felt that?
Yeah, I mean, it was very obvious. I mean, the moment that Saddam Hussein fell down, the moment is when the Shia start getting more, they start getting more mobilized, and you can see pictures of Ayatollah Sistani and Muqtada Sadr and all of these religious figures. And it's very obvious that these guys are sectarian. And so I said, well, secularism is literally the solution. Is that try to make Sunnis and Shias equal under the law? And we seen that success happening when the first Prime Minister Ayat Allawi, who was a secularist, when he was the Prime Minister, there were much less sectarian warfare happening. But the moment where the Iraqi election happened is when Islamist Party, Shia Party won, and that, which is my biggest agreement with the United States when it comes to U.S. management of the war, because I always thought that Iraq was not qualified yet for a democracy, and there needs to be some sort of transitional period between building a secular civil society, and that will take some time, and then you create an election, not like after 40 years of dictatorship, you would just make people who, many of them are illiterate, would just go vote for the best interest of Iraq.
Right.
So,
and we've seen many instances of this, as in Hamas was democratically elected, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Iraq isn't the only example of a democratic election.
Egypt is another example of the majority of people because voted for a Muslim Brotherhood. Is that, I mean, one of the things of living under dictatorship, what I've like noticed is that dictatorships kill everybody who disagree with them. So people who are left out are the ones who don't care about life. So who don't care about life? The jihadists.
Yeah.
So dictatorships, for a large extent, create radical Muslims because they kill all the moderates, and they then give the people a false binary system, is that either you want us or you want the terrorists. And the same thing happening now in Syria. So like with Assad, and now with the Russian intervention, most of what they're killing are the moderate rebels who are in the middle. So when they destroy the moderate rebels, they're going to give the world two choices. You want us or ISIS. And I can assure you, most people, including myself, would choose Assad over ISIS.
Right.
And that is so dictatorships create extremism. So what happens is that when these dictatorships go away, they literally created like a hostage crisis. They created like a prison. And you get out of the prison, and eventually you would have continuous sectarian warfare and continuous like bad politics. And America was obviously not very well versed in post-dictatorship. There was a lot of focus on like, let's get rid of Saddam Hussein, but there was very little thinking of what after, which is post-dictatorship, which is much more important than just getting rid of the dictator. Right.
So where do you place, or how much do you place the blame on the United States? And I guess at that time it was a coalition that at least originally went in.
Yeah.
Of course it was mostly us. Because I think most people in America now, there's a real sense that it was the wrong war to go to, and they lied us into the war and all that stuff, which I agree with. But the sense I'm getting from you is that there was a ton of really bad stuff going on there anyway, and a lot of it maybe would have bubbled up.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many things that were like, I mean, Islamic extremism is not new. It didn't start with the United States. It didn't start with the CIA or the Israel or the Mossad. So these things have been going on for hundreds of years. Like since the Shia conflict, I mean, it started in Iraq. And I mean, back at the time, I don't think it was called Iraq, but I mean, Najaf and Karbala is where Imam Hussein and Imam Ali were killed, and that's where the split between the Sunni Shia thing happened. And then fast forward to modern history, you got the Ottoman Empire, who was at war with the Persian Safawiyin, who are the Persian Empire, who are the Shias, and the Ottomans were the Sunnis. So the conflict has been going on for hundreds of years. And all these dictatorships are unsustainable, like Saddam was unsustainable. And America did not intervene in Syria. And until now, recently, after the Messiah came back, is that they still had the civil war between Sunnis and Shias, and they still had ISIS and Al Qaeda and all of these stuff. So it's I mean, I never thought that I never think that the United States is the root of all problems, obviously. But I think sometimes that the United States, if some policies need to be applied based upon the understanding of the region that can prevent or reduce amount of sectarian violence, and that, in my opinion, was to keep some sort of transitional secular regime that can build a civil society that can reduce. I mean, obviously, it's not going to eliminate secular.
Right. So basically, if you had a time machine, you would have gone back to right around the elections when they finally had the free elections.
Yeah.
And then you would have just sort of you would have wanted either American troops or something there to just to stabilize it a little bit longer. And yet, at the same time, as an American, even though I know it's all gotten worse in these last 3 years since we pulled out, no, we didn't want to stay there either, and that's double-edged sword.
The thing of like, when I always go like conversation with like neoconservatives and things of that of people who believe like continuous aggressive foreign policy is that. It doesn't fit in with the American political system. It's like an American political system, you have elections every 4 years. And like nation building, you're talking about the Middle East, which
doesn't get done in 4 years.
It does, obviously it doesn't get, probably 40 years. So it is unsustainable to have like a political system in which like the president has to change every 4 years, and nation building, especially in a region that is very different, let's say like Germany during World War II or after World War II, and Japan, is that, I mean, Iraq is literally has the worst neighborhood ever. You have Saudi Arabia, which is the rule of the Wahhabi regime that's not that different from ISIS, and you have Iran on the east that is the motherlode of Shia Islam.
Yeah.
And Iraq is in the middle between Shia, and America was expecting, like, so come to Iraq and there's like create a liberal democracy in the middle of all regimes that are theocratic, that don't believe in liberal democracy. Yeah. And one of them is an ally, which is kind of ironic. It's like, so they try, like now with the Syria, they try to work with non-democratic countries to create democracy.
It makes no sense.
I mean, it makes no sense. It's like the idea that Saudi Arabia or Qatar or even Iran would allow a liberal democracy to flourish in Syria and Iraq is pure delusion.
Yeah, they're not that thrilled with the one liberal democracy that's in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, let's hope it stays. I mean, it seems like Israel is going. I mean, as I can see, is like there is a lot of elements of theocratic leadership is now rising up in Israel, which I don't see Israel. I mean, I hope it's going to continue to be liberal democracy, but I see there are a lot of elements that may not be in the future.